In October 1940, an aircraft company that had never built a fighter made the most audacious promise in aviation history. The Luftwaffe has spent months bombing British cities, ports, factories and airfields. Every week, more aircraft are destroyed than the Royal Air Force can comfortably replace. Across Europe, Nazi Germany controls the skies from Norway to France. The Battle of Britain has proven that the Luftwaffe can be resisted. But survival is not the same as victory. Britain needs thousands of new fighters, and it needs them immediately. The obvious solution is to buy more Curtiss P-40 Warhawks from the United States. The P-40 is already in production. It is proven, reliable, and available. Then an American aircraft company makes a proposal so audacious that many British officials initially struggle to believe it. Instead of buying an existing fighter, they say, "Let us design an entirely new one." Not in 3 years, not in 2 years, not even in 1. They promise to build the prototype in just 102 days. The company making that promise has never built a modern fighter aircraft. Within 5 years, the airplane born from that impossible deadline will escort Allied bombers all the way to Berlin, destroy thousands of German aircraft, cripple the Luftwaffe, and become one of the most celebrated fighters in aviation history. This is the story of the P-51 Mustang, the fighter that changed the air war over Europe, and the failing aircraft company that built it in just 102 days. To understand why the Mustang mattered, you first have to understand how desperate Britain's situation really was. In the summer of 1940, France collapses in just 6 weeks. One of Europe's strongest armies disappears almost overnight. British soldiers escape across the English Channel at Dunkirk, leaving behind thousands of vehicles, tanks, artillery pieces, and nearly all of their heavy equipment. Britain now stands alone. Across the Channel, Adolf Hitler controls the largest military machine Europe has ever seen. The Luftwaffe fields thousands of modern aircraft. The German army dominates the continent. An invasion of Britain, Operation Sea Lion, appears increasingly possible. The Royal Air Force has survived the Battle of Britain, but survival comes at an enormous cost. Hurricanes and Spitfires are flying almost continuously. Pilots are exhausted. Aircraft are wearing out faster than factories can replace them. British manufacturers, especially Supermarine and Hawker, are already producing fighters around the clock. Every available machine tool is occupied. Every skilled worker is already working overtime. There is simply no room to build significantly more aircraft. Britain needs another source. Only one country possesses the industrial capacity to provide it: the United States. Although America remains officially neutral, President Franklin Roosevelt increasingly views Britain's survival as essential to American security. Arms sales expand rapidly. American factories begin producing aircraft, engines, trucks, ammunition, and supplies for Britain under contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. One British purchasing commission travels to California with a simple objective: buy more Curtiss P-40 fighters. The Curtiss-Wright Corporation already builds the aircraft in large numbers. It is not the fastest fighter in the world, but it is rugged, dependable, and available immediately. There is just one problem: Curtiss cannot build them fast enough. Its production lines are already committed to existing orders. Even if Britain is willing to pay, the company cannot significantly increase deliveries. The British commissioners leave disappointed. Fortunately, someone else is listening. Only a few hundred miles away in Inglewood, California, sits a company that desperately needs work: North American Aviation. Unlike Boeing, Lockheed, or Douglas, North American is not considered one of America's premier aircraft manufacturers. It has built trainers like the BT-9 and the famous T-6 Texan, aircraft that teach pilots how to fly. It has produced bombers such as the B-25 Mitchell, but it has never designed a world-class single-seat fighter. Many aviation experts consider it an inexperienced newcomer. Its president disagrees. James Howard Dutch Kindleberger has built his career on ignoring conventional wisdom. Born in 1895, Kindleberger begins as an aircraft mechanic before the First World War. He works for Glenn Martin, then Douglas Aircraft, gaining a reputation as an exceptional production engineer. He believes American aircraft manufacturing suffers from one fundamental problem. Companies spend too much time making small improvements to old designs. He prefers starting over. Kindleberger recruits brilliant young engineers, gives them unusual freedom, and demands impossible deadlines. Most executives avoid risk. Kindleberger embraces it. When British purchasing officials visit North American to discuss building Curtiss P-40s under license, Kindleberger asks a question that changes aviation history. Instead of building someone else's fighter, why not let North American design a better one? The British delegation is stunned. They did not come looking for an experimental airplane. They came looking for aircraft that already existed. A new fighter normally requires years of development, countless wind tunnel tests, structural redesigns, and flight evaluations before entering production. Europe is already at war. Britain does not have years. Kindleberger makes an extraordinary promise. If Britain will place the order, North American will deliver the prototype in just 120 days. His engineers later reduce the target even further, 102. The proposal sounds almost reckless. Designing a completely new combat aircraft in barely 3 months borders on impossible. Yet the British Commission agrees. On April 10, 1940, before the prototype even exists, Britain orders 320 aircraft. North American has just sold a fighter that has never flown. Now it has to build it. At the centre of the project stands a quiet German engineer whose life has taken an extraordinary path. His name is Edgar Schmued. Schmued is born in Germany in 1899 and develops a fascination with aviation during the earliest years of powered flight. He studies engineering and works for several European aircraft companies before immigrating to the United States in the 1920s. Unlike many engineers, Schmued thinks less about individual components than about the airplane as a complete system. Every surface must serve multiple purposes. Every pound saved improves performance. Every unnecessary rivet is wasted weight. His philosophy is elegant simplicity. When Kindleberger gives him the new British fighter project, Schmued does not begin by looking at existing aircraft. He begins with a blank sheet of paper. The timing could not be worse. The company has no luxury to experiment. Every decision must be correct the first time. North American organises its engineering teams around the clock. Draftsmen work day and night. Blueprints are completed while other departments are already manufacturing components that have barely finished being designed. Normally, engineers finish the aircraft before production begins. Here, design and manufacturing happen simultaneously. If one department makes a mistake, every department behind it loses precious days. Failure is not measured in money. Failure is measured in whether Britain survives long enough to receive the aircraft. Schmued studies every successful fighter in the world. He examines the Spitfire's graceful wing, the Messerschmitt Bf-109's compact construction, the Curtiss P-40's rugged durability. Then he deliberately avoids copying any of them. Instead, he pursues one overriding objective: speed, not simply engine power, aerodynamic efficiency. Most fighters of the era generate enormous drag because their cooling systems create turbulent airflow beneath the fuselage. Schmued believes this problem can be turned into an advantage. Working with aerodynamicist Raymond Rice, the team develops an innovative radiator installation beneath the aircraft. As hot air exits the radiator, it accelerates through a carefully shaped duct. Under the right conditions, the expanding airflow actually produces a small amount of forward thrust, partially offsetting the drag created by cooling. It is an application of what engineers call the Meredith effect, a concept few aircraft manufacturers have successfully exploited. Every mile per hour matters. Schmued also chooses an advanced laminar flow wing developed with research from the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. Unlike conventional wings, which become turbulent relatively early across their surface, this airfoil keeps airflow smooth for much longer. The result is significantly lower drag at high speed. The wing is difficult to manufacture. Its surfaces must be exceptionally smooth. Even tiny imperfections reduce its effectiveness. Many companies reject the concept because it complicates production. Schmued accepts the challenge anyway. He believes the performance gains justify every additional hour of manufacturing precision. The new fighter receives an internal company designation, I-73X. To almost everyone outside the factory, it is simply another experimental airplane. Inside North American, however, the pressure is unlike anything the company has ever experienced. The clock has already started. 102 days. An aircraft that has never existed must soon leave the ground. And if it fails, North American Aviation may never receive another opportunity like it again. The prototype flew, and from the moment it lifted off, it flew beautifully. On October the 26th, 1940, just 102 days after the contract had been signed, test pilot Vance Breese lifted the NA-73X into the California sky for the first time. Early test flights revealed an aircraft capable of nearly 390 miles per hour. It was stable. It was responsive. It handled like no fighter the British had ever flown. North American had kept its promise. An aircraft that had existed only on drawing boards barely 3 months earlier had become one of the fastest fighters in the world. But speed alone does not win wars. The Royal Air Force soon discovered that the Mustang had one serious weakness. At low and medium altitude, it was exceptional. Above roughly 15,000 feet, its performance faded rapidly. The culprit was not the airframe, it was the engine. The Allison V-1710 was dependable and powerful near the ground, where American doctrine expected most air combat to take place. Europe was different. The Luftwaffe fought high above the continent, where thin air robbed naturally aspirated engines of power. As the Mustang climbed, it became slower. Its rate of climb dropped. Its acceleration suffered. Meanwhile, German fighters powered by supercharged engines retained their performance. The Mustang could dominate one battlefield. Unfortunately, the decisive battlefield was thousands of feet higher. The British recognized the problem almost immediately, yet they also recognized something even more important. The airplane itself was extraordinary. Its handling was superb. Its visibility was excellent. Its range was unlike anything in Allied service. The weakness was concentrated in a single component. Replace the engine and the entire aircraft might change. At first, however, the Mustang entered combat exactly as it had been designed. The RAF used it primarily for tactical reconnaissance and low-level attack missions over occupied France. Flying just above the treetops, it photographed German positions, attacked railways, strafed convoys, and struck targets that heavier aircraft could not reach. Pilots admired its speed. They praised its responsiveness. Most of all, they appreciated its remarkable range. The Mustang could fly deeper into occupied Europe than almost any other single-engine fighter available to the Allies. Then another group began paying close attention. At Rolls-Royce, engineers wondered what would happen if they removed the Allison engine altogether. The company had recently perfected a power plant that was rapidly becoming the heart of Britain's air war. The Rolls-Royce Merlin. It already powered the Spitfire and the Lancaster bomber. It featured a sophisticated two-stage, two-speed supercharger that maintained engine performance at high altitude, where the Allison steadily lost power. On paper, the idea sounded simple. Replace one engine with another. In reality, it required redesigning the aircraft's entire nose section, cooling system, engine mounts, propeller installation and weight distribution. No one knew whether the result would even fly. Rolls-Royce converted several Mustangs for testing. The transformation shocked everyone involved. The new aircraft climbed dramatically faster. Its ceiling increased by thousands of feet. Its top speed exceeded 430 miles per hour. Most importantly, it retained its performance where the original Mustang had struggled. The airplane had finally become what its designers had unknowingly built the airframe to support. Across the Atlantic, American officials noticed the British experiments. The United States Army Air Forces approved production of a new version, powered not by a British-built Merlin, but by one manufactured under license by Packard in Detroit. Packard engineers produced the Merlin to extraordinarily high standards, allowing American factories to build thousands of engines without disrupting British production. The new aircraft received the designation P-51B. Later came the P-51C. Then, in 1944, North American introduced the definitive version, the P-51D. It carried 650 caliber Browning machine guns instead of 4. A redesigned bubble canopy replaced the older framed cockpit, giving pilots almost unrestricted visibility in every direction. In aerial combat, seeing the enemy first often determined who survived. The bubble canopy gave Mustang pilots one of the best views of any fighter of the war. Internal fuel capacity increased. External drop tanks could be carried beneath the wings. The combination changed everything. The P-51 could now escort bombers farther than anyone had imagined possible. Not to the French coast, not to Western Germany, all the way to Berlin. That single capability solved one of the greatest strategic problems facing the Allied air campaign. For years, American heavy bombers had crossed occupied Europe without continuous fighter protection. Escort fighters simply lacked the range. They turned back long before the bombers reached their targets. German fighter pilots understood the pattern perfectly. They waited. They conserved fuel. Then, once the escorts disappeared, they attacked the bombers in overwhelming numbers. Losses became catastrophic. Entire formations vanished in the skies over Germany. The most devastating example came on October 14, 1943, the second Schweinfurt raid. More than 290 B-17 flying fortresses attacked German ball-bearing factories deep inside the Reich. By the end of the mission, 60 bombers had been destroyed. Hundreds more returned riddled with damage. Nearly 600 American airmen were killed, wounded or captured in a single day. The United States could build more bombers. Replacing experienced crews was far harder. Strategic bombing itself began to look unsustainable. The Allies did not need a tougher bomber. They needed a fighter that could stay beside it all the way to Berlin. Nobody believed such a fighter existed. They were about to be proven wrong. The Mustang's greatest weapon was not its speed. It was not its firepower. It was not even the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that had transformed it from a promising fighter into an extraordinary one. Its greatest weapon was endurance. For the first time in the Second World War, a fighter could escort heavy bombers from England to the heart of Germany, remain with them during the bombing run, fight enemy interceptors, and still have enough fuel to bring its pilot home. That single capability changed the strategic balance of the air war. Until the arrival of the Mustang, the Luftwaffe had fought on its own terms. German fighters waited until Allied escorts turned back, then attacked the bombers while they were alone. Every American crew understood the routine. They watched the escorting fighters peel away as fuel ran low, knowing that the most dangerous part of the mission was only beginning. The German pilots knew it too. They timed their attacks with deadly precision. The Mustang destroyed that advantage. The aircraft's extraordinary range came from a combination of efficient aerodynamics and external drop tanks. Earlier fighters burned fuel too quickly to remain with the bomber streams deep inside Germany. The Mustang consumed less fuel than almost any high-performance fighter of its generation. With 2 disposable external fuel tanks mounted beneath its wings, it could fly well over 1,500 miles before returning to base. Pilots simply emptied the external tanks first, released them when empty, and entered combat with a lighter, more maneuverable aircraft carrying a full internal fuel load. It was an elegantly simple solution. The bombers finally had a guardian that could stay with them from takeoff to landing. The United States Army Air Forces immediately recognized what this meant. In December 1943, the first P-51B Mustangs began arriving in England. Within weeks, they were flying escort missions over occupied Europe. The difference was immediate. German pilots suddenly found American fighters waiting for them hundreds of miles farther east than ever before. The familiar safe zone no longer existed. Then came one of the most important decisions of the entire air war. General James Doolittle assumed command of the 8th Air Force in January 1944. Until then, escort fighters had been ordered to remain close to the bomber formations. Their job was defensive: protect the bombers, never leave them. Doolittle changed the rules completely. He told the Mustang pilots to stop thinking defensively. Instead of waiting for German fighters to attack the bombers, they would hunt them before they ever reached the formations. The escorts were unleashed. Mustangs swept ahead of the bombers, crossed German airfields, strafed runways, attacked aircraft during takeoff and landing, and forced the Luftwaffe into combat wherever it appeared. German pilots who survived the bomber interception often found themselves attacked before they could even return to base. For the first time, the hunters had become the hunted. The timing could not have been more critical. In February 1944, the Allies launched Operation Argument, better known as Big Week. Its objective was simple: destroy the German aircraft industry. Factories producing fighters, engines, ball bearings, and aircraft components became primary targets. American bombers struck day after day, despite terrible weather and fierce resistance. The Luftwaffe had no choice but to respond. Hundreds of German fighters rose to intercept the incoming formations. Waiting for them were hundreds of P-51 Mustangs. The battles that followed were among the largest fighter engagements of the war. The Luftwaffe fought with enormous courage. Many of its pilots were veterans with years of combat experience. But experience could not replace numbers, nor could it replace fuel. The German Air Force was already suffering from shortages of trained pilots, aviation gasoline, and replacement aircraft. Every experienced pilot lost during Big Week represented years of training that Germany could no longer afford. The Mustang accelerated that decline. By the end of the campaign, German aircraft factories had suffered severe damage. More importantly, the Luftwaffe had lost hundreds of irreplaceable pilots. Aircraft could be built again. Experienced men could not. The Mustang's 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns proved devastating. Unlike the rifle caliber weapons carried by many earlier fighters, the heavy Browning machine guns combined range, accuracy, reliability, and destructive power. Each gun fired approximately 750 rounds per minute. Together, all 6 produced a torrent of fire capable of tearing apart enemy fighters in seconds. The guns rarely jammed. Their ammunition remained effective at longer ranges than many German weapons. American pilots developed enormous confidence in them. The Mustang itself was equally forgiving. Pilots transitioning from older fighters found its controls responsive but predictable. The Merlin engine delivered smooth power. The bubble canopy introduced on the later P-51D variant dramatically improved visibility in every direction. For a fighter pilot, seeing the enemy first often meant surviving the encounter. The Mustang gave them that advantage. Among the pilots who flew the Mustang to its limits, few became more legendary than Major George Preddy. Originally flying the P-47 Thunderbolt, Preddy converted to the Mustang and quickly became one of America's highest scoring fighter aces in Europe. He combined patience with extraordinary marksmanship. Rather than firing from long range, Preddy closed the distance until he was almost certain of a hit. The Mustang's speed allowed him to dictate when to engage and when to break away. By the end of the war, he had destroyed more than 25 enemy aircraft in aerial combat. He was only one among many. Hundreds of Mustang pilots rapidly accumulated victories as the balance of air power shifted toward the Allies. The Luftwaffe still possessed dangerous aircraft. The Focke-Wulf FW-190 remained heavily armed and exceptionally rugged. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 continued to climb well and accelerate rapidly. Late in the war, Germany introduced revolutionary jet fighters like the Messerschmitt Me-262. On paper, the Me-262 was vastly faster than any piston-engine aircraft. But speed alone could not save Germany. Jets required vulnerable airfields, scarce fuel, and highly trained pilots. Mustangs simply waited near German bases, attacking the jets during takeoff and landing when they were slowest and least able to defend themselves. Even the most advanced fighter in the world became vulnerable once it touched the runway. By the spring of 1944, the strategic bombing campaign looked completely different. American bomber crews noticed the change almost immediately. Where formations had once suffered devastating losses over Germany, they now watched silver Mustangs weaving above and around them for the entire mission. Whenever German fighters appeared, the escorts met them before they reached the bombers. Losses declined dramatically. Morale soared. Bomber crews began referring to the Mustangs as their guardian angels. Many believed the sight of those long noses and polished aluminum wings meant they would actually make it home. The statistics supported them. Throughout 1943, certain bombing missions had suffered catastrophic casualty rates. By mid-1944, improved escort coverage had fundamentally altered the equation. The Luftwaffe could no longer inflict the same level of damage without paying an even heavier price. Every interception became a battle of attrition. Germany was increasingly unable to win. The Mustang also excelled in another role. After escorting the bombers home, pilots frequently descended to attack railways, locomotives, fuel convoys, bridges, communication centres, and military vehicles. Armed with bombs or rockets beneath its wings, the P-51 became an effective fighter bomber capable of striking almost any target of opportunity. German transportation networks suffered constant disruption. Fuel deliveries slowed. Troop movements became increasingly hazardous. Nothing that moved during daylight could assume safety. The Mustang had become more than an escort fighter. It had become a weapon that extended Allied air superiority wherever it flew. And soon that superiority would prove decisive for the largest amphibious invasion in history. By the summer of 1944, something had changed over Germany. American bomber crews could feel it. Long-range escort fighters no longer abandoned the bombers at the German border. They stayed with them all the way to the target and all the way home. For the first time, German fighter pilots faced enemy fighters during the entire mission, instead of only attacking isolated bomber formations. Everything changed. Luftwaffe pilots could no longer wait safely for the escorts to turn back. They had to fight through Mustangs before reaching the bombers, and often never reached them at all. The consequences extended far beyond individual air battles. Germany began losing experienced fighter pilots faster than it could replace them. Aircraft factories could still build airplanes, but skilled combat pilots required years to train. Every veteran lost was a permanent blow to Germany's ability to defend its skies. The Mustang became the aircraft that accelerated that collapse. Its mission was not simply to shoot down enemy fighters, it was to destroy the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force. Mustang pilots swept ahead of bomber formations, attacked enemy airfields, strafed locomotives, destroyed fuel trucks, and hunted German aircraft before they could even take off. The offensive moved from the skies directly onto the ground. During the final year of the war, P-51 units destroyed thousands of German aircraft in the air and on the ground. Every destroyed fighter meant fewer aircraft intercepting the bombers the following day. By early 1945, Allied bombers operated over Germany with an AIR superiority that had seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Factories, railroads, bridges, oil refineries and transportation networks came under relentless attack. The strategic bombing campaign finally achieved what planners had envisioned from the beginning. Not because bombers had become stronger, because the Mustang made it possible for them to survive. The P-51 also proved remarkably versatile. It excelled as a high-altitude escort fighter, but it was equally effective flying low-level ground attack missions. It carried bombs, rockets and machine guns against trains, bridges, convoys, tanks and troop concentrations. By the end of the war, it had become one of the most capable multi-role fighters ever built. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, more than 15,000 Mustangs had been produced. The aircraft continued serving during the occupation of Europe before seeing combat again in the Korean War, where it flew thousands of close air support missions before jet fighters gradually assumed air superiority roles. Many nations continued operating the Mustang for decades. Some remained in military service into the 1980s. Hundreds still fly today. What began as an emergency British order evolved into one of the most recognisable aircraft ever built. Its engineering achievements remain extraordinary. A laminar flow wing, a cooling system that actually produced thrust, a Packard-built Merlin engine that transformed its performance, a range that no other Allied fighter could match, and perhaps most impressively, an entire aircraft designed, prototyped and flown in just 102 days. But perhaps the greatest achievement belongs to the company that built it. Before the war, North American Aviation had never designed this successful frontline fighter. It was considered an ambitious but unproven manufacturer, competing against companies with far longer histories. Most executives would have accepted the British offer to build another company's aircraft under license. Instead, they took a gamble. They promised something they had never built, then they delivered. That decision changed the air war over Europe. The P-51 Mustang did not win the Second World War by itself. No single weapon ever does. But it solved one of the biggest strategic problems facing the Allies. It gave heavy bombers the protection they desperately needed. It helped destroy the Luftwaffe. It secured Allied air superiority over Europe. And once the skies belonged to the Allies, everything below them became vulnerable. The story of the Mustang is ultimately not just about speed, range, or engineering. It is about what happens when impossible deadlines meet extraordinary talent. 102 days, from blank paper to first flight. A company that had never built a world-class fighter created one of the greatest combat aircraft in history, not through luck, not through unlimited resources, but through engineering, determination, and the refusal to believe that impossible deadlines were truly impossible. If you enjoyed this story of the P-51 Mustang, subscribe for more documentaries on the companies, engineers, and inventions that quietly changed history. Every week, we explore the machines and people that shaped the modern world, one remarkable story at a time.